Are you ready to learn the truth about how food was stored in the Wild West? This story completely changes our usual ideas about the lives of pioneers and how they built their homes. Usually, building a storage facility seems like a simple task that does not require any special engineering skills or precise calculations. In reality, preserving supplies required a deep understanding of physics, material properties, and the climatic characteristics of the region. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how one strange hanging shelf helps store provisions for 2 winters in a row. What if I told you that everything you believed about storing supplies was wrong? For many years, it was believed that heavy wooden boxes on the floor were the best shelter for valuable cargo. One mountain hunter completely refuted this belief by creating an incredible floating system inside his hut. He built a wide platform out of thick planks, which was attached high up under the ceiling beams. This massive structure visually resembled an upside-down table, securely fixed in place by a complex system of sturdy straps. The assembly of such a unique structure required remarkable precision and enormous patience from its creator. The hunter used only dense cedar wood, pre-dried in the bright mountain sun for several months. All wooden elements were fitted together exclusively with a system of wooden spikes and deep grooves. When the humidity level in the room changed, these natural fasteners expanded even more and held the parts firmly in place. The absence of metal nails guaranteed protection from rust and prevented the gradual destruction of the supporting frame. Particular attention was paid to the shape of this amazing suspended platform. The sides of the structure were made with a slight outward slope, forming a wide and spacious bowl. The bottom of the shelf consisted of narrow slats laid with carefully calibrated gaps of several millimeters. This lattice base played a key role in the entire climate control system of the small log house. The hunter spent more than a week precisely aligning each slat using a homemade spirit level. The fastening system was a separate masterpiece of practical frontier engineering. The platform was held in the air by 4 thick straps cut from the thickest part of rawhide. The upper ends of these straps were thrown over the massive, load-bearing beams of the roof and secured with reliable knots. Smooth birch bark plates were laid where the leather and wood touched to prevent rubbing. This allowed the heavy shelf to sway slightly, compensating for the deformation of the hut itself during strong winds. Access to the floating storage was provided by a special ladder made of light spruce poles. The hunter did not nail the steps to the wall in order to maintain the complete autonomy of his climate control system. The ladder was stored in another corner of the room and was only placed against the shelf when absolutely necessary. This ensured that the valuable cargo was completely isolated from any contact with the floor or walls of the dwelling. Strict isolation was the main rule of the entire concept of this unusual suspended storage facility. The surface of each board in the structure was sanded to a perfectly smooth finish using river sand. The absence of splinters and roughness prevented the accumulation of tiny particles of dust and dirt on the shelf elements. The cleanliness of the wood ensured the absence of mold fungi, which often destroyed supplies in ordinary storerooms. The mountain man regularly wiped the entire structure with a dry canvas cloth to maintain perfect order. This simple procedure became an important part of his weekly routine of caring for his home. The unique shelf was not located in the very center of the room, but significantly offset toward the north wall. This positioning was chosen after long observations of the movement of shadows and the distribution of coolness inside the house. The sun's rays penetrating through small windows on the south side never touched the wooden surface of the platform. Constant exposure to thick shade helped to avoid sudden temperature changes on the surface of the wood. The stability of the microclimate became the foundation for the successful preservation of the cargo over many months. Even the corners of the suspended platform were specially rounded with a sharp hunting knife. Sharp edges could create unnecessary air turbulence, disrupting the smooth flow of internal air currents. The hunter sought to create the most streamlined shape possible that would fit harmoniously into the interior of the hut. Every line in this design obeyed the strict laws of aerodynamics, although the creator himself was unlikely to have known such words. He simply followed his many years of experience of survival in harsh mountain conditions. This complex suspended structure became the heart of the log cabin. It required constant visual monitoring, but in return gave absolute confidence in the future. The Mountain Man was proud of his creation, which was strikingly different from the usual methods of organizing everyday life. We would be very interested to hear your opinion on such engineering solutions of the past. What do you think about such non-standard approaches to organizing space? Write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new exciting stories about the exploration of the Wild West. Are you ready for the shocking truth about temperature distribution inside a typical log cabin? Most people believe that cool air evenly fills the entire space of a room at dusk. In reality, distinct temperature layers form inside any house, invisible to the naked eye. Hot air from the hearth always rises rapidly to the roof, gathering in a dense hot cloud. At the same time, the icy cold from the frozen ground settles like a heavy blanket on the wooden floorboards. The hunter spent many sleepless nights studying these invisible boundaries of heat and cold in his dwelling. He hung thin strips of wax-soaked fabric throughout the hut to monitor the slightest changes in temperature. The wax melted on the upper tiers and became rock hard near the floor, indicating the exact boundaries of the climatic zones. These practical experiments allowed him to calculate the ideal neutral temperature zone right in the middle of the room. It was in this narrow layer of stable climate that the famous suspended shelf was placed. The height of the structure was exactly 2 human heights from the level of the lower logs of the wooden floor. At this particular point in space, the heat from the hearth had already dissipated and lost its destructive power. At the same time, the piercing, icy cold emanating from the winter foundation of the building did not reach this spot at all. The supplies were stored in a unique zone of constant coolness, without being exposed to freezing or excessive heat. The stability of the temperature became the most important factor in preserving the proper structure of the stored products. Even a few centimeters of deviation in the shelf's height would have catastrophic consequences for the cargo. If it were too low, the fibers would freeze and then break down when the spring warmth returned. Raising the structure above the required level would lead to drying out and rapid spoilage from exposure to heat. The creator of the shelf showed incredible precision in the final fixing of the supporting leather straps. He regularly checked the tension of the fastenings so that the platform would not sag under its own weight. During periods of severe frost, the edge of the ice layer near the floor could rise slightly. The Mountain Man had anticipated this scenario while designing his system. He specifically made the length of the fastening straps adjustable with wooden pins with several holes. This made it possible to quickly raise the entire platform a few inches when the temperature outside dropped sharply. This adaptability made the structure completely invulnerable to the vagaries of the harsh mountain winter. In the spring, the adjustment process was reversed due to the warming of the soil under the hut. The warm layer began to expand, and the hunter smoothly lowered the shelf closer to the saving coolness of the lower crowns. This constant game with height required tremendous attention and a precise understanding of the processes taking place around him. The dwelling turned into a complex mechanism that had to be skillfully managed every day. The suspended platform became a kind of float on the waves of an invisible temperature ocean. It is interesting to note that the height of the ceilings in the hut was originally designed with the future suspension system in mind. The hunter deliberately cut the walls 2 crowns higher than the standard size for such buildings in this region. This decision required enormous additional physical effort at the stage of harvesting heavy round timber. However, the extra space under the roof allowed for the creation of a necessary buffer for the hot air from the hearth. The heat gathered high above the shelf, creating a reliable thermal shield from the frosty drafts from the attic. Accurate height calculation was the first step in creating the ideal microclimate for preserving vital supplies. The shelf was always located exactly where temperature fluctuations were least noticeable throughout the year. This prevented sudden thawing or excessive freezing of valuable cargo during seasonal changes. However, static air could cause rapid spoilage even in the most ideal temperature zone of the room. Did you know that invisible air currents became the main tool for preserving supplies in an incredible way? I discovered this by accident while studying the construction plans of frontier pioneers in an old archive. It turns out that a complex system of continuous drafts was deliberately created inside the hut for constant, high-quality ventilation. The hunter intentionally left small gaps between the logs in specific places on the north and south walls. These narrow slits formed a directed flow of fresh air that constantly blew over the suspended wooden structure. The air moved in an even layer, without creating strong turbulence or dangerous atmospheric pressure drops. The speed of this internal wind was regulated by wooden wedges inserted into the gaps between the logs. On windy days, the hunter tightly plugged the openings with moss, leaving only tiny channels for oxygen to pass through. In calm weather, the wedges were removed, allowing the hut to breathe freely through the entire surface of the side walls. The moving airflow acted like an invisible brush, sweeping away the slightest drops of moisture from the surface of the supplies. The constant renewal of air prevented stagnation and the formation of harmful mold on the wooden shelves. The special lattice structure of the platform's bottom revealed its full potential in conjunction with the directed draft. The airflow penetrated from below through the gaps between the narrow slats, evenly enveloping each item on the shelf. The air removed excess moisture from the underside of the supplies and carried it unhindered toward the fireplace. Such comprehensive ventilation ensured absolute dryness, even in the rainiest and foggiest mountain seasons. The hunter created a real climate chamber, operating exclusively on the energy of the laws of aerodynamics. An important element of this system was the correct angle of the hut itself in relation to the windrows. The builders studied the directions of the prevailing air currents in this particular valley in advance, before laying the first log. The house was positioned so that the main wind hit the strongest corner, gently dispersing along the long walls. Part of this pressure was neatly captured by ventilation slots and directed straight to the suspended structure. Nature itself did all the work to maintain the ideal microclimate inside the man-made wooden shelter. Even the shape of the objects on the shelf was of great importance for the correct distribution of the airflow. The hunter never stacked his supplies in a solid, dense layer that would block the movement of the fresh mountain breeze. Each item was placed at a strict distance from its neighbor, forming a kind of miniature aerodynamic corridor on the platform. The wind flowed freely between the rows, ensuring the same storage conditions for each individual item of cargo. This rule of arrangement was strictly observed throughout the entire time the strange shelf was in use. The constant movement of invisible masses turned an ordinary corner under the ceiling into the perfect tool for frontier survival. Fresh air continuously flowed around every detail of the wooden structure, carrying away the slightest drops of destructive dew. Man learned to control the powerful elements inside his own small and modest log dwelling. This incredible skill became a decisive factor in the long and successful struggle against the harsh natural environment. If you enjoy learning about such unique engineering secrets of the past, please like this video. The secret passed down from generation to generation lies in the design of the most ordinary homestone hearth. The smoke from the burning logs played a crucial role in the smooth operation of this strange hanging shelf. The hearth was positioned so that a light gray haze always passed directly under the wooden latticework. Fine particles of ash and soot settled on the surface of the supplies, creating an invisible but powerful protective layer. This thin barrier reliably blocked the access of destructive oxygen to the fibers of the valuable items stored on the platform. To obtain the right type of smoke, the hunter used only hardwoods from local mountains. Hickory and oak logs burned slowly, producing a steady stream of fragrant smoke without an abundance of resin. Conifers were strictly excluded from this process, as their smoke left a bitter and acrid residue. The man spent hours by the fire, carefully regulating the air supply to maintain the desired intensity of smoldering. The right smoke had to be almost transparent, with a slight bluish tint and a pleasant tart smell. The smoke curtain also served as a powerful natural filter for the fresh breeze coming in from the street. Passing through the cloud above the hearth, the cold mountain air warmed slightly and lost excess moisture. By the time it reached the suspended shelf, this stream was completely dry and saturated with preservative wood elements. Oxidation of stocks in such a unique gas environment was completely halted for the long, cold months. This combination of ventilation and smoke treatment was the pinnacle of engineering genius by a simple mountain trailblazer. The accumulation of soot on the wooden shelf itself also benefited the entire suspended structure. Over time, the cedar boards darkened and became covered with a thick, shiny crust of settled resinous smoke particles. This crust preserved the wood itself, making it completely immune to changes in humidity levels in the hut. The shelf became incredibly durable and ceased to react to spring fluctuations in atmospheric pressure. The hearth not only protected the load, but also strengthened the very foundation of this floating climate system. The amount of smoke was strictly regulated depending on the season and the outside air temperature. In winter, when the fire burned constantly, the hunter opened a special damper to vent excess smoke outside. In summer, he lit a small fire from smoldering sawdust solely to maintain the protective layer of soot. This process required a deep understanding of the chemistry of combustion and an amazing ability to read the signs of the environment. Man worked in absolute harmony with the elements, forcing them to serve his own life goals. A properly directed smoke stream became the most reliable assistant in the difficult task of long-term natural conservation. It penetrated the deepest layers of the reserves and reliably fixed their ideal physical condition. Without this constant treatment, the entire unique climatic system would quickly lose its fantastic efficiency. However, even thick smoke could not cope with one very insidious threat during periods of prolonged rainfall. In the next chapter, you will learn how mountain people fought against the destructive force of high atmospheric dryness and humidity. High humidity has always been the main invisible enemy of any supplies in the wild and unexplored frontier. Even at the ideal temperature and with good smoke coverage, excess water in the air triggered destructive processes. A strange wooden shelf solved this complex problem by using special natural moisture-absorbing materials. Along all four edges of the suspended structure, the hunter placed long linen bags filled with dried wood ash. These natural absorbents eagerly absorbed any moisture that penetrated the house with the street winds. The ash for these bags was collected only from the central part of the hearth after the coals had completely cooled down. It was sifted through a fine sieve to remove large pieces of unburned wood or sharp stones. The bags were sewn from the densest fabric that allowed air to pass through but reliably retained the gray dust inside. Once a month, the hunter removed these peculiar filters and dried them on hot stones near the fire. After this simple procedure, the ash regained its properties and was once again ready to combat moisture. An additional means of controlling dryness was thin bundles of dry wormwood, laid out in the corners of the floating wooden platform. This bitter plant not only repelled unwanted guests with its smell, but also excellently absorbed excess moisture. As the wormwood branches became saturated with water, they became soft and heavy, signaling the need for immediate replacement. The hunter harvested huge sheaves of this herb at the end of summer to provide himself with absorbents for the whole winter. This double control allowed him to maintain ideal air dryness directly in the area where the valuable cargo was located. The wood of the hut itself also participated in the complex process of regulating humidity inside the small living space. The interior walls, which were not covered with varnish or paint, were able to absorb excess water in rainy weather and release it during dry periods. The hunter deliberately left the logs in their original state, allowing the wood to breathe along with the room. The large area of log walls acted as a giant sponge, smoothing out sharp fluctuations in humidity. The hanging shelf was located in the very center of this huge natural regulator of the ideal room climate. Strict control over the drying of firewood before lighting the hearth also contributed greatly to the overall dryness. Using wet logs would fill the hut with heavy steam, which would instantly settle on the shelf. The wood was stored under a canopy for at least a year before being brought into the burning area inside the house. Every action of the hunter was subordinated to the single goal of maintaining a stable and dry environment under the ceiling. This system required tremendous discipline, but the results of such labor exceeded any bold expectations. What you have never seen before is a unique temperature map inside a small house. The mountain man spent an entire frosty month studying the microclimate of his own massive log structure. With remarkable accuracy, he identified areas where the intense cold from outside lingered much longer than usual. It turned out that the blank northern wall of the building formed a constant and very stable cold zone around itself. It was against this frozen wall that the heaviest part of the suspended wooden structure was moved. The logs on the north side accumulated the street frost at night and released it extremely slowly into the room during the day. They worked like huge natural batteries, charged with life-saving coolness to maintain the necessary microclimate of the shelf. The thickness of these particular logs was deliberately increased during the construction of the log house to enhance the effect. The cold they radiated created a kind of shield that prevented warm air from passing from the hearth to the back of the platform. As a result, an ideal temperature gradient formed on the shelf itself, from the warmer edge to the icy one. This temperature gradient allowed the hunter to sort his supplies in strict accordance with their storage requirements. The most heat-sensitive items were placed close to the icy north wall at the far end of the shelf. Items that could withstand a slight increase in temperature were placed closer to the center and southern edge of the platform. This clever layout made the most efficient use of every available area of directed cold in a small space. The structure became a multi-zone climate cabinet without a single moving mechanical part. Interestingly, the outside of the north wall was additionally reinforced with a thick layer of dense earth and river stones. This earthen embankment, half a man's height, protected the logs from direct gusts of wind and pressure drops. The earth acted as an excellent thermal insulator, keeping the inside of the logs at a deep minus even during rare winter thaws. The hunter created an artificial glacier built directly into the power structure of his own wooden house. This made it possible to avoid building a separate underground storage facility, which would have required enormous physical effort. Proper use of such cold zones saved a huge amount of firewood during the long winter season. The hunter did not need to artificially cool the space or build complex additional partitions inside the living room. The unique shape of the hut and its clever orientation to the cardinal points did all the invisible hard work. This approach demonstrates a deep understanding of the laws of nature and an amazing ability to work with them in a mutually beneficial way. Are you ready to learn in the next chapter how this shelf protected supplies from unexpected loss and external threats? Preserving supplies required reliable protection from any external encroachment and unforeseen physical loss of valuable cargo. Ordinary chests standing on the floor were easily destroyed and could be opened without much effort. Hungry predators and small forest rodents always found their way into ground-level storage facilities. The strange shelf was designed to completely eliminate any physical access to supplies from floor level. The suspension system had no direct points of contact with the walls, making it impossible to directly access the platform. It hung in absolute emptiness, like an isolated island in the airy ocean of a spacious log cabin. The distance from the walls was carefully calculated to account for the maximum jump of a large marten or wolverine. The straps holding the shelf were specially treated to prevent any foreign objects from moving along them. Wild rodents are excellent at climbing ordinary ropes, so the hunter needed a non-standard approach. Simple wooden shields on ropes did not always save him from the tenacious claws of nimble pests. The mountain man thickly coated the surface of the leather with fresh pine resin mixed with sharp silicon dust. This mixture created a rough and extremely dangerous sandpaper-like surface on the straps. Small predators injured their paws and stuck fast at the slightest attempt to climb down to the food on these hangers. This sticky and rough barrier became an insurmountable obstacle for any external physical threat. The resin hardly dried out in the cool air under the ceiling, retaining its protective properties for months. Regular renewal of this layer guaranteed 100% safety for all the contents of the suspended structure. The hunter checked the condition of the sticky barrier every time before leaving for a long hunt. He carefully scraped off the areas that had hardened over time with a knife and applied a fresh portion of fragrant resin. This took a minimum of time but gave absolute confidence in the safety of the provisions. The high sides of the platform also served as an important element of the security system. acting as reliable fortress walls. They were cut from the smoothest boards and polished to a state that ruled out any possibility of catching on the edge. If the beast miraculously overcame the straps, it simply would not be able to get over this slippery barrier. The wood was carefully rubbed with fine river sand to a perfect mirror finish. Even the sharp claws of forest cats slipped on this perfectly smooth vertical surface. The height of the sides was calculated to completely hide the objects inside from view from floor level. The lack of visual contact reduced the likelihood of accidental damage to supplies when moving long objects inside the hut. People did not have to worry about accidentally hitting the bags with a rifle or a long pole while cleaning the room. The sides protected the cargo from side impacts and created an additional pocket to retain the preserving smoke. Thick smoke from the hearth accumulated in this reservoir and constantly fumigated the dried meat. This naturally extended the shelf life of the products and repelled insects. Even the ceiling beams to which the structure was attached were stripped of bark and sanded to a shine. This prevented the accumulation of dust or the formation of hidden cracks that could compromise the strength of the platform's fastenings. Tree bark often hides beetle larvae that can spoil furs and valuable food supplies. The entire perimeter of the ceiling above the shelf was regularly inspected and cleaned with a bundle of stiff, dry grass. The hunter created an absolute zone of cleanliness and inaccessibility for any destructive external factors around his supplies. Loss of cargo due to physical intrusion became mathematically impossible under these strict conditions. This multi-level security system worked passively without requiring constant monitoring or complex actions on the part of humans. The shelf protected itself through clever geometry, the right materials, and ingenious spatial arrangement. Wild animals act instinctively and give up fairly quickly when faced with unfamiliar physical obstacles. The suspended structure completely broke the usual patterns of behavior of forest animals. They simply did not understand how to get to the appetizing smelling prey hanging in the void. The hunter could safely leave his hut for several weeks without worrying about the safety of his most valuable possessions. Isolating supplies in the air proved to be the most effective and reliable solution in the history of small shelter construction. The long winter months in the taiga did not forgive mistakes in food storage. The loss of provisions meant certain death among the snowdrifts far from civilization. Ideal protection was only possible thanks to a comprehensive approach to the design of each individual detail. Choosing the right material was a decisive step in creating this amazing and reliable ceiling storage system. The hunter categorically refused to use soft woods, which are prone to rapid deformation under constant load. Pine or spruce could easily bend under the weight of hundreds of kilograms of hunted meat. For a durable structure, trees of a specific density and harvested at the right time were required. The frame was based on boards made of rock oak, which is incredibly strong and resistant to environmental changes. This oak was cut down only at the very end of winter, when the movement of sap in the trunk had completely stopped. Winter wood was extremely dry and never cracked during subsequent prolonged processing with an axe. The wood was deliberately left to freeze in severe frost to remove any excess moisture. Only after this harsh test were the oak logs cut into thick planks for the future frame. For the bottom of the platform, on the contrary, a lighter material was required so as not to overload the load-bearing ceiling beams of the hut. The choice fell on high mountain red cedar, known for its lightweight and bright, moisture-repellent aroma. Cedar slats were easy to sand and created a perfectly flat surface for placing valuable cargo. The scent of cedar served as an additional natural barrier, keeping the air around the suspended structure clean and fresh. This resinous aroma also did a great job of repelling moths, which could cause irreparable damage to expensive animal skins. The combination of a heavy oak frame and a light cedar bottom gave the shelf the perfect balance of strength and weight. The leather for the supporting straps was selected with no less care than the wood for the main suspended wooden frame. Only the thickest part of the hide from the withers of a large animal, which had undergone a long process of slow tanning, was used. The leather was soaked in a saturated oak bark infusion for several weeks, acquiring the rigidity of a metal cable. The vegetable tannins penetrated deep into the structure of the fibers and made them resistant to decay. This traditional process required enormous patience and attention to detail. However, the end result fully justified all the effort expended. After drying, the straps were generously impregnated with melted animal fat to preserve their elasticity and protect them from drying out. Such fastenings could withstand the weight of an adult without the slightest sign of stretching or tearing of the fibers. Bear fat was deeply absorbed into the tanned leather and perfectly repelled any moisture from the air. Thanks to this procedure, the straps did not squeak or rub against the wooden beams at the joints. The rejection of metal parts was dictated not only by their high cost in the remote mountain frontier. In conditions of constant temperature changes, metal inevitably becomes covered with condensation, which causes rust and rot in the adjacent wood. Instead of nails, strong wedges made of dry acacia wood were used to tightly fasten the frame elements together. The wooden joints worked as a single living organism, expanding and contracting in sync with changes in the weather. At high humidity, the wedges swelled, making the joints even tighter and incredibly reliable. This ancient method of fastening parts has proven its incredible effectiveness and phenomenal durability in practice. The hunter made all the tools for construction himself, modifying ordinary purchased blades to suit his specific needs. A special narrow chisel, sharpened at an unusual acute angle for working with hard oak, was used to cut deep grooves. Standard tools simply got stuck in the dense wood or quickly became blunt against the hard fibers. The hunter specially hardened the steel in oil and constantly sharpened the blade on a smooth river stone. The parts were so precisely fitted that it was impossible to insert even a knife blade into the joints between the boards. Building the shelf took almost as long as erecting the walls of the largest log cabin. The craftsman took his time, fully understanding the importance of his work for survival in this harsh land. Careful selection of materials ensured that the structure would last for many years without the need for repairs. The daily use of the floating structure required the hunter to follow a strict set of unwritten rules and daily rituals. Each access to the shelf was planned in advance to minimize the time spent using the wooden ladder. A person would only go up with a specially prepared list of what needed to be retrieved or put back. Quick and precise movements allowed them to avoid disrupting the established air currents and maintaining the desired temperature of the cargo. This process resembled the work of a watchmaker, where every action is calibrated to the millimeter and second. The layout of items on the platform was never random and was subject to a strict system of balancing the total weight. Heavy items were always placed strictly in the center, evenly distributing the load across all 4 leather straps. Light items were placed closer to the sides, creating the correct aerodynamic shape for the fresh mountain wind to flow around. When removing a heavy item, the hunter would always move the remaining items to restore the ideal weight balance. This routine prevented dangerous platform skewing and ensured stable tension in the ceiling mounting system. The shelf was cleaned once a month, which was a complex process of completely renewing the microclimate of the platform. All supplies were carefully lowered down, after which each board was thoroughly wiped with a stiff, dry canvas cloth. The hunter removed excess accumulated soot and replaced the bags of ash with fresh ones, dried near the hearth. After cleaning, the supplies were returned to their places in a new order to change the points of contact with the wooden bottom. This rotation prevented caking and ensured thorough ventilation of each item of valuable cargo on the shelf. Particular attention was paid to visually inspecting the leather straps and wooden wedges for microscopic cracks. If the slightest signs of drying out of the leather were detected, the hunter immediately rubbed an additional portion of heated fat into it. If necessary, the wooden wedges were carefully tapped with a wooden hammer to restore the maximum rigidity of the entire oak frame. The shelf was a living mechanism that required constant care, attention, and respectful treatment from its sole creator. Operating the structure became an integral part of the measured and harsh life on the border of the civilized world. The rules for using the shelf were as strictly observed as the rules for handling loaded flintlock weapons in the forest. No outsider was ever allowed to work with this unique suspended storage system. The hunter understood that the slightest imbalance or ventilation could lead to the catastrophic loss of all winter supplies. Daily work with the shelf instilled tremendous discipline, composure, and incredible concentration on the smallest details of everyday life. It was this discipline that became the key to the survival of mountain people in the most extreme conditions of the wild. The strange hanging shelf withstood the test of two of the harshest winters in the history of this mountain region, with flying colors. While many settlers lost their supplies due to sudden thaws, the hunters' supplies remained in perfect condition. The structure proved its incredible reliability without a single crack or an inch of sagging. The directed airflow system worked flawlessly, keeping the cargo dry even during the spring snowmelt. All of the builders' complex theoretical calculations were fully confirmed in practice in the real conditions of survival on the frontier. The quality of the preserved supplies amazed the rare guests who visited the hunter's hut during the warm summer and autumn months. Items that had been stored under the ceiling for several seasons retained their original structure, color, and necessary internal moisture content. The preservative layer of soot reliably locked all the useful properties inside the fibers, protecting them from the destructive effects of time. The hunter did not have to throw away a single item due to spoilage, which was an absolute record for those harsh years. The unique climatic zone of the shelf worked better than any modern refrigeration or expensive industrial storage equipment. Interestingly, over the course of 2 years, the wooden structure itself became even stronger and incredibly structurally monolithic. The oak boards dried out completely and tightened around the connecting wedges so tightly that they seemed to be a single piece of wood. Under constant stress and regular impregnation with fat, the leather straps acquired the fantastic rigidity and reliability of metal. The shelf became an integral and most durable part of the hut, capable of outlasting the log structure itself with proper care. This phenomenal result was the best reward for the creator for his long, painstaking engineering and physical labor. The experience of using the floating platform completely changed the hunter's approach to organizing his daily life and planning future supplies. Confidence in the safety of his cargo allowed him to stockpile more resources and spend less time on daily searches for food. The shelf gave him not only preserved items, but also the most valuable things on the frontier: free time and safety. The unique suspended structure became a true monument to human ingenuity, resourcefulness, and the ability to subdue the harsh laws of nature. It forever inscribed the name of its nameless creator in the unspoken history of ingenious engineering solutions in the Wild West. This success proves that survival on the frontier of civilization depended not only on luck or brute physical strength. The winners were those who knew how to observe the elements, understand the properties of materials, and apply this knowledge in everyday life. The genius of the strange shelf lay in its absolute simplicity and the maximum efficiency of every detail, thought out to the smallest detail. This story remains a vivid example of how a person can create an ideal environment in the most hostile surroundings. 2 years of perfect operation are the best proof of the triumph of reason over the harsh conditions of the wild American wilderness. We have seen how a deep understanding of the laws of physics and the properties of natural materials helped people survive in the harsh conditions of the early frontier. The strange hanging shelf became a true engineering masterpiece, harmoniously combining invisible air currents, smoke from the hearth, and the right height. This experience undeniably proves that ingenuity and careful observation are often much more important than sophisticated industrial tools. Such unique tricks of the pioneers continue to sincerely amaze modern people with their elegant simplicity and incredible practical effectiveness. Be sure to write in the comments what other little-known topics from the life of the settlers of the Wild West you would like to see in future videos. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with exciting new historical discoveries and forgotten technologies of the past.